Welcome everyone to MaleFuzz TV. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about Silo Episode 1. It's called Freedom Day. So I will start spoiler free because it is an Episode 1. This won the pilot vote over on patreon.com/MaleFuzzTV. It is an Apple TV Plus show. It's based on a book series, I believe, and it is a high concept science fiction show where, at least at face value, we're in a post-apocalyptic style world where a sort of confined, large but confined, like society is living in this giant silo, which has got like 100+ floors, and it's got farming floors. It's got a whole infrastructure to be self-sustainable, and no one knows like what life was like before the silo. No one knows who built the silo, and that's kind of like the basic setup of the whole thing. And it is a criminal offense to want to go outside, basically. So, very high concept. It makes me think of a lot of different things. There's a little bit of Snowpiercer, that was on a train, obviously, but this idea that you're in like this future where everything's gone, but not as much, at least from this first episode, there's not as much like class system stuff in play, although that's definitely stuff that might come into it more as it goes on. But it makes me think of that. It makes me think of the Fallout video games, because you're in these, they're called vaults in those games, but that's like these underground societies hiding from the post-apocalyptic wasteland and stuff like that. So there's definitely lots of other science fiction examples of this type of story, and this is going for this prestige TV take on it. It's got an interesting cast. You got Rashida Jones in there, David Ayolo, if I'm saying his name right. I always struggle with his last name. But Tim Robbins is in there. Rebecca Ferguson's in there. Not all of these actors have a lot in episode 1 per se, but they seem like they're going to be prominent for the season as a whole. So yeah, my first impressions of this are that it is conceptually very solid, and I had like a decent time watching the first episode. I think we've got good actors in there, we've got some interesting concepts. I think it's not a complete home run immediately for me, and I think it really comes down to just one. I feel like these concepts I've seen done in elsewhere, and I don't necessarily always like the concepts. In theory, I should. There's nothing wrong with them. Like, I actually really like this idea, especially since, like, before it even gets into anything, I immediately started thinking, like, but what if this is all a lie? What if outside's actually fine? Like, that was one of the first things I thought of at the start of this episode, as I immediately started to question, like, how true any of this is, because it's just this sort of, like, everyone seems determined to keep the status quo and make people scared of going outside. So immediately I started thinking like that, and that started to remind me of some other things, which I won't say because it would be spoiling those other. There's a comic book especially that's I'm really thinking of, a recent comic book that sprung to mind almost instantly. But I think maybe what it was just slightly missing for me, because it's got decent production value. There's a little bit of obvious like CG sets, because obviously this tall silo, like, it's not all really there. They'll have sets for the rooms and stuff, but there's a little bit of trickery to make it feel big. But I think the one thing that felt like was missing here, and what was otherwise a pretty solid first episode setting up the concept of the show, and I do think the seeds of the mystery are all solid enough, even if they do feel a little derivative to me, and that I feel like I've seen this type of thing before, is I think I just wanted a little bit of a stronger directorial hand and just a little bit more mood. I couldn't help shake the feeling that as I was watching it, that I was just watching a TV show. And I know that sounds like a silly thing to say, but I think good examples of this type of high concept are oozing in atmosphere, and I just didn't really feel like I was getting much of that here. It felt a little sterile at points. I really appreciated like what it was setting up with the characters and what it was setting up with the mystery, and obviously the actors themselves are very strong, capable actors. It's actually really interesting seeing Rashida Jones in a more a dramatic role, because I'm just so used to her doing comedy. So that's actually kind of neat to see that. But I think it feeling like I've seen this type of thing before in different forms, whether it is something like Snowpiercer or other. There's definitely other examples. I'm struggling to think of them specifically, but other examples of this type of, like, the people running this place we all live in might be lying to us kind of thing. I guess in a way it's almost even a little bit Fahrenheit 451 or 1984. There's maybe just a pinch of that stuff in there as well. But as soon as, like, I started to feel those feelings, like, I liked conceptually everything it was doing, but I couldn't help shake that it wasn't necessarily doing anything super exciting with it yet. It wasn't doing anything that was, like, really capturing my imagination. Rebecca Ferguson's only introduced right at the end of the episode, actually, and she's like the biggest face on the poster. So that's interesting. That we start off without what seems like it's going to be the main character. In this first episode, it really feels like the others are the leads, even though, like, because of what happens in the episode, like, it made me think there's going to be a lot more time jumping around structure. Or are they doing something where it's going to kind of jump from character to character, and, like, each one's going to get, like, a big focus per episode or something like that? I wasn't really sure. But I mean, it was an easy enough watch. Like, it is a full hour long, but it did do a lot of setup in this first episode. I always like in a science fiction show when they set up a simple thing. So in the case of this episode, they set up something where Rashida Jones's character Allison says, like, if I'm right about this thing, I will do this, right? The one thing I can do to communicate, but it still get this air of mystery around it. But it sets up a simple thing where if she does X thing, it means she's right about something the plot set up. And when that kind of plays out, I'm like, I like when shows or stories in general do this, where it seems like they're confirming something crazy that the other character wouldn't believe, but it's still not quite enough on its own to really kind of, like, it's not inconclusive. It's not complete proof, but it's just enough to inspire the other character to have that seed of doubt. Like, I do like that, and there's a couple of things like that in here. I also appreciate, in fact, another thing this makes me think of even is Horizon Forbidden Dawn, another video game, because that's set in, like, the far future where society's built up again and doesn't really remember what our society was like. Like, we're ancient to them, and they don't really know about what life was like for us, kind of thing. That's kind of like some of the vibes that this is going for as well. So yeah, so I think it's a good first episode, but not one that completely captured my imagination. Like, I kind of, like, I enjoyed it well enough, but it felt almost like it was going through the motions at certain points. And it's one of these things, is that the more these types of shows get made on all these streaming services, and we get more of these big sci-fi concepts, it's almost getting harder and harder to really feel special right away, which I think is where I'm coming from when I say I almost wish it was just oozing more of an atmosphere. Because if I felt really engrossed in the world, I think it would have went a long way to make me just kind of love everything, as opposed to just like everything, which is kind of like where I'm feeling with this first episode. So I actually do want to give the spoiler. I don't always. Sometimes with pilots, I don't even feel like bothering doing a spoiler section. I do actually kind of want to talk about what this episode reveals and sets up, and what the main plot of it is, because it is kind of interesting from a story and detail point of view. So spoilers for episode 1. Only episode 1, but spoilers for episode 1. Because I know episode 2 went out the same day, and I think episode 3 went out on, like, Friday there. So there's a couple more to check out if you want to. But so the first episode, at the start of the episode, it basically tells us, Rashida Jones's character seemingly has went outside and died. And that her husband, Sheriff Holston, played by Oyelowo, I can't say his name, god damn it. So Holston, I can just call him Holston now. He basically says he wants to go outside, and that's the first big hint that that's a thing you don't say, right? That's like, you're just giving yourself a death sentence by saying that, because they will put you outside and you will die. But the story jumps back, and we kind of see the backstory as to what happened to his wife, what happened to Rashida Jones's character Allison, and why she made the choices she did. And we found out a lot of things about the world. We find out that you have to apply to try and become pregnant, right? So they get a year window. They take out a birth control, and they have a year to get pregnant. And this is their third time trying this, and they're in the late 30s now, so it kind of feels like it's the last chance. And it's not going very well, right? The story, the episode takes place over that year, up until there's no, until the time runs out. But over the course of that year, she is, first of all, she's told by a woman that, the powers that be in here don't want someone like her to become pregnant, i.e. someone who isn't just a bootlicker who will do everything without asking questions. She's someone who's naturally inquisitive, and she's, not had any serious trouble, but has done published articles in her IT work that have been redacted afterwards because they're exploring ideas that the regime or whatever it is don't want to be out there. They don't want to be making these questions. So that makes her question things, and she also helps a guy down in another sector who finds an old hard drive. And I do love that it's something that's recognizable to us, where I'm like, oh, that's a hard drive. I know exactly what that is. Because that's the thing, this world doesn't seem to have elevators in their big silo, but they do have power, and they do have some form of computers. In fact, it was the computers with the green text that really made me think of Fallout, because that's exactly what that sort of retro future Fallout has. But when she ends up looking at these files later in the episode, they seem to reveal that there's a hidden tunnel at the bottom of the silo. They seem to reveal a lot of things. But first and foremost is they reveal that the outside, at least at some point when this hard drive was being used, the footage from outside reveals that the outside is fine. That it's not this wasteland that they all see on the quote-unquote windows. They're not really windows, they're actually just video screens, and they've got cameras outside. But potentially this is a lie, because I was already thinking earlier on that this whole thing might be a lie. This literally might be present day, and it's a giant experiment or something, or whatever it may be. But I actually didn't think there were real footage of outside. Later in the episode, though, it seems like they are real, but maybe there's some sort of augmented reality filter to make it look like a wasteland, to make it, because when she goes outside later, you see her walking around outside. So clearly it is a filtered version of reality. But this is what really makes her sort of snap, and she actually cuts into herself and finds that her birth control's still there, that the doctor never really took it out. And this is what leads her to saying she wants to go outside and all the rest of it. And all this is playing out. And these details are all quite interesting. This is some mythology. This is setting up some stuff, who's in charge here. There's also talk in the episode of they're celebrating Freedom Day, which is when they stopped an uprising 140 years ago, and they blame the rebels of that uprising for deleting all of the history, but the implication here may be that they themselves deleted all the history to control everyone going forward, to create this boogeyman of the rebels that they can use as a sort of scapegoat and sort of as a political thing. So all this was super interesting, and it convinces her that she wants to go outside and see what the world is like. And we don't go outside with her, we just see it inside on the screens. But she says to her husband that if she, why do they always clean? Right? Because they set up in the episode that whenever someone does go outside in a hazmat suit and then kills over and dies when their air runs out, that they're always asked to clean the camera lenses because they get really dirty. And we kind of see that throughout the episode, that they look really sort of smudgy and there's lots of dark spots all over the image and stuff like that. And she says, whenever someone gets sent out, they always say, F you, I'm not going to clean anything. Why would I do that? And she says, why do they end up doing it? And her theory is, believing that outside is fine and it's green and it's lush, that they're trying to show everyone that it's fine outside, that it's not actually toxic, it's not a wasteland, it's fine. And so she says to her husband, I will clean the camera if it's fine. If I clean the camera, it means that outside is okay, and that they're lying to you somehow. And sure enough, when she goes outside, she does. And I really like this moment, because it's this thing where it sets up that she's going to clean it because of this, and this is a little sign to him that maybe she's right, because that's what she said she was going to do. He doesn't know for sure, because he's still seeing a wasteland. He's still seeing all these things, and he's been raised his entire life to believe this, and this. but it's just enough for that seed of doubt, and that's quite interesting to me. I really like that as a storytelling mechanic. But she still keels over, and that's the thing. We see other hazmat suit people outside that have keeled over. So the question is that also fake? Is that also something that they're kind of augmenting into the image, or are they dying still because like they're just being poisoned when they go outside? Like, you know, when they're putting them in the suit, the people who are in charge here, are they just like slipping them something so that they will die in a few minutes, and it looks like they're dying because of the atmosphere? My only doubt for that is that it feels like Rashida Jones is going to be in the show more because she's like one of the top billed actors. So I feel like she's probably alive. But her husband wants to go out looking for her, and that seems to be something we're setting up in the present day part. But there's also another bit of the timeline that's introduced right before the end of the episode, which is about a year before the present day stuff. So all of this stuff with the wife is 3 years ago, I believe, and then there's like a year before the present day. So 2 years after she's went outside, Holston is still pretty depressed about it, as you imagine, but he's investigating a murder down on another level, and there's a witness, or it's a death, but there's one witness saying it was a murder, and we're introduced to that character at the end, which is Rebecca Ferguson, who is like help running the engine that like fuels the entire silo. So obviously it's something they're going to like expand upon all this mythology, you would presume, as the episodes go on. But what I will give it credit for is that it does feel like a fairly well-rounded mythology so far. You know, this episode, it sets up the rules and not going outside. It sets up the sort of use of propaganda and like, this is Freedom Day because we stopped those people who wanted to go outside. That was the uprising that we put down all these years ago. Before any of us were even born, this happened. It sets up kind of the idea of like the Big Brother side of it, where they're being watched and controlled. That this is all about that. It sets up some of the individual rules of the world, which is not just anyone can get pregnant. That just all these like bits and pieces. Like I thought, like it does feel like a fairly well-rounded world, and that probably helps that it comes from a book, where the book probably has a lot of details that are just like mentioned offhand that the writers probably went nuts with because he or she really wanted to like build this like fully fleshed world. So yeah, it's interesting because I don't really have a whole lot of negative things to say, except that it just doesn't feel that special yet. And it could get there. It's entirely possible that it could get there. Because all of the themes that it's playing with all sound good. I think I've seen enough movies that deal with these themes, either in very similar ways or maybe in slightly different ways, but still hitting on those themes. Stuff that's set in like one location, cut off from the outside world. I've seen a bunch of stories and read a bunch of stories that are kind of like that. So I don't know if this episode as of yet does anything special to make me go, oh, that's why this one is special, that's why this one is unique, and why you should come back to it and see it through. But I would definitely say check it out. It's definitely not bad, and it's got enough things in there, enough little teases and Easter eggs as to what's going on and the mystery of what this place is. Like I say, I think I would have just loved to feel a bit more of an atmosphere, which I did think was a bit lacking. I think if I felt like a really strong directorial style where I was really feeling the emotion of everything, I probably would have been kind of in love with this. But as it is, it's good. But like, I'm not like ready to like, stake anything on it being worth the journey per se. But obviously, by the time this goes out, 3 episodes will be available. So by all means, tell me if episodes 2 and 3 improve upon things. It is kind of interesting that one of the seemingly main characters is barely in episode 1, which is maybe why I'd say maybe that's why they put out 2 episodes on day 1. But honestly, like Apple do that for a lot of their shows. I think it's more that they structured this knowing that the first 2 episodes would be out together. Rather than that's why they chose to put them out, because Apple do this with all their shows, so they would have known that going in by this point. But yeah, it's an interesting sci-fi world, and hopefully it sort of starts to feel a bit more special and unique as it goes on. But yeah, there you go. That's my thoughts. Let me know what you thought of the episode in the comments below. Like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications, all that stuff. It helps out a lot. Get us on Twitter at mail_fuzz for channel updates. And of course, you can support all the content over at patreon.com/mailfuzztv. But that is me, so thank you once again for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?